Okay, we are live. This is the second webinar in our Job Seeker series. So we've got 11 webinars in total, group coaching on a Friday morning, and then you can book in one-to-one sessions as well. So if you are job hunting right now or know anyone that does or is, then feel free to share this series with them. Everything is free and open to everyone, so feel free to register for as much as you'd like. I'll pop the link to the whole series in the chat afterwards. Big thank you to Adam for today, but also just all our volunteers in general, because we wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for everybody volunteering their time and expertise. Adam has to be one of the most supportive people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting, and I feel like he spends half his time supporting other people and then sharing his knowledge and expertise with all of us. So I, for one, am very grateful, but I also know today is going to be great. He's going to chat for about 15 minutes, and then we'll go over to Q&A. So any questions, comments, anything as we go, please just pop them in the chat, and I promise we will get to them afterwards. Final thing, everything's being recorded, so we'll pop a link to the recording and the event series in the chat after this as well. Okay, that's it. Adam, over to you.
Thanks, LJ, and thanks also for the warning. I'll have to curb my usual over-swearing behaviour, I guess, won't I? Hey, but also, mate, kudos to you. I know we were just chatting about it before the recording, but I think a fantastic thing that you and the guys are doing, and hopefully there's some people that get a little bit of a kick out of it. Yeah, really impressive. Thanks, mate. Okay, so I think I'm talking today on how do you know it's the right role for you. And I kind of wanted to break that down into a few different areas because, you know, the three key words for me are probably you and then role and then right, for whatever that may or may not mean. And I think a lot of the time, if we start with the you, and if you're asking enough questions of yourself, you know, not just at times of being made redundant or impacted or other difficult periods, but if you're always sort of asking a little bit more around yourself, what makes me tick? What do I get a kick out of? It probably helps some sort of direction all the time, not just in times of hardship. But then if you took into this really specific use case right now, taking a look at different opportunities that are out there and assuming you get to the point of having some other options coming up, which is fantastic. You know, how do you then look at what that may mean from a fit, if you like, to you as an individual? And I think some of the things that you can start to do, I mean, there's a lot to unpack, there's a lot to break down, but the good news is you can start doing that right now. So kind of ask questions of yourself all the time. You know, what did I get a kick out of? Was that something really meaningful to me? You know, it might even be just in some of the interpersonal relationships or activities or interactions outside of a work environment. We all have our own little preferences. We all have our own little quirks. We all have our own styles as to how we like to interact and the people that we do best with. So I think one of the first things is just to take the time to pause and start asking yourselves, you know, more questions as much as you can at any point. And then from there, have a bit of a think around what else might I do. So well before I think you get to the point of here's a couple of roles or here's an opportunity or here's somebody who's made a potential offer to me, have a start to have a bit of a think around what's the sort of stuff that makes me tick as an individual. One of my favorite interview questions was always to sit down with somebody and say, hey, Raj or Mary or whoever, tell me about the last time you went home and you sat on the couch and you cracked a bottle of red or a soda water or an orange juice or whatever it was, but you sat down and you felt a sense of accomplishment or satisfaction or meaning or purpose. Yeah, you were kind of proud of yourself. You had that little grin on your face that meant, yeah, that was a good day. And then what was it? So what was it? Was it something that you've been working at for 5 years or for 5 months? Was it just a decision you made or the way you handled a situation on a whim or in an emergency or any other case? But why was it that made you tick or made you feel that little sense of pride? The reason I like asking that as an interview question is because it's really good to get to understand what makes an individual tick. And then obviously if you can align that to the sort of role or the sort of work that you're undertaking, then that's probably a really good thing and you're likely to do work better together. But then also the way that somebody answers that is also really telling. So if someone says, oh, yeah, look, I won this massive deal worth, $200 million today, and I've now hit my target for the whole year, I'm going to smash it next year. Yeah, that's clearly some of the motivational aspects that will drive them. It might be somebody else who says almost entirely the opposite. I had a team member promoted today, and I've been working with him for the last 3 years to coach him, and he's now finally got to the point where he's got the confidence to take on the new role, or I really feel like he's hitting his stride now. Those sorts of things, and the way you talk about it in your own mind, I think, are really telling. But really good stuff to kind of listen to about yourself and what makes you tick. The second sort of thing that I often recommend for people to do is take a look through the likes of your LinkedIn's, your Seeks, your Indeed, your Joras, whatever it might be, and just browse. So have a look in the sorts of roles that either you would normally look for or you think that you might want to look at and explore, but also be sort of brave enough to look outside of those traditional sort of roles or the obvious and stuff that you just find interesting. And then just have a look at the sort of things that you pause on. So, what roles, what opportunities, what descriptions, what wording, what language, etc., what struck a chord with you? And again, try and then ask yourself why. Why is it that some roles seem more interesting than others? Why is it that some of the positions that you might have thought you wouldn't have applied for also weren't of interest? And often that can be really telling as well. Because remember that I think as you're sort of going on this sort of journey, careers are never a point-to-point destination. There's often this sort of winding crisscross of different directions, and it changes. We all have different needs at different times. And the worst mistake you can do, I think, is saying, I think I have to get to X and be so single-minded on a particular role or area or sector if it doesn't really resonate with you just because you thought that's where you had to get to. So I think that browsing exercise is quite useful, as much as anything for the A, to start to look at what's out there, get a bit of a feel of the market, but B, most importantly, what does it tell me about myself as I'm just browsing through and what resonated with me or what didn't resonate with me as well. And then if you start to break it down further to that, you're asking yourself lots of questions. We're having a look at what might be interesting to you. You're starting to get a bit of a sense of saying, yep, I think that's a sort of area I want to look at. But hopefully also some things going, hey, well, that's interesting. I don't know why that resonated with me. I want to dig a bit deeper and start to look at that as well. I don't know how many people viewing here might be old enough, but for those within Australia in the 80s, there's a guy called Dr. Colin Benjamin, who was the founder of the Life Be Unit movement. Fascinating guy, very, very intelligent man. And I had a discussion with him a few years gone by around how as individuals or as workplaces, more importantly, we need to look at that atomization or deconstructing this 40-hour-a-week construct and, need to look at it more granular level. And he always reminds me of this, but he said, look, can I challenge you on this? Don't call it work. Don't even call it work to start with. Call it people doing meaningful things together. And it's a really good filter to take when you're looking at, is this the right role for me? Am I doing something that I find meaningful? And of course, that's not going to mean that you jump out of bed every morning with a massive grin on your face before your first coffee and run into every single day. There's always going to be the good with the bad. But if you can bring it back to that, did I get meaning out of it? If you spent the last 3 years and never had one of that sit on the couch moments going, that gave me a sense of pride or satisfaction, that's probably very telling that, maybe you're not really aligned with something that gives you meaning as well. So if we've done that and we've sort of had a good hard look at ourselves, it's an introspective thing to do, but then the reality is that there's a crossover, and I often describe it as the two pyramids, if you like, or the two triangles. If I was talking to a friend about their next career move or the role that's right for me, and said, hey, LJ, you wouldn't believe it, but I've just spoke to business. They're ABC type of business. This is the type of role. It's this sort of location. It's this area doing this sort of work on a day-to-day basis. What is it that get you so excited? Going, oh my God, that's my dream job, as we often describe it. Think about what that absolute pinnacle is. And then often, to be honest, you kind of work backwards from there. There's very, very few of those unicorn roles or whatever it might be that are the perfect role. In fact, no role is perfect, of course. But then if you think that that's the top of my pyramid, the other really important filter, I think, is to reverse that. Who is your next boss or manager or group or tribe or board or whatever it might be that sees your profile, listens to you, listens to what makes you tick, and thinks, oh my God, that person is absolutely perfect for us or for our organization or for what we're doing. And then the reality is it's kind of an intersection of those two triangles, sort of inverted, pointing to each other and trying to get as much of an overlap as possible as to whether or not that is the right role for me. But also it's not a destination. Every career is more around the journey, or every step is more around the journey, what you learn about yourself, what you might learn in skills, what you might learn in experiences, what you might be able to give to others to get that sense of satisfaction or accomplishment as well. So if we talked about you, I think, and we've had a good look at ourselves, the next one is probably the role in terms of the order of importance. And there are lots and lots and lots of variables that we don't always think about, but can be really meaningful. So is it public or is it private? Is it local or is it multinational? Is it large company versus small company? Are they funded versus bootstrapped? All the different variables that come into really what that day-to-day means. There are pros and cons with everything. I've worked in some weird and wacky stuff from massive Australian corporates and multinational consulting businesses right through to startups, and they are starkly different, and there's no perfect. But think about what sorts of organizations, what sorts of sectors, what sort of industries you may have equally as important to you. Sectors that you simply don't want to work in. It may be, I don't know, tobacco companies for argument's sake, or something like that. They say, no, that really grates me. Again, obviously start to think about those things first so you can start to sort of map it out. And then as you ideally then get to the point where you're looking at, you've had a good hard look at yourself, you've had a look at some of the roles and opportunities, you've started to create some conversations as well as apply to them, and you're starting to have more and more cups of coffee, then if you start to get more serious, of course, we can look at our own informal referencing on a role or an opportunity, if you like, just like you would if you were going to hire somebody. So who do we know that either is working there, was working there, or knows somebody who is or was working there, and can give you a bit of real insight that you can very subtly but informally trust in that conversation. It sounds really basic, but the number of times, in fact, in both directions, that we don't see either somebody doing some subtle referencing on somebody they should know, or vice versa, an individual doing some subtle referencing or informal referencing on an opportunity. And that includes not just the business, but of course, the people that you're going to be working with and in and around you and spending a big chunk of your day-to-day, because that's obviously a big factor as well. And then the final part, I think, on the role is if you think about it and use what I often talk about is that sort of projectionist thinking. If you were sitting in this role for as much as you can tell and all the work you've done now on yourself and your informal backgrounding, how would you talk about what you do to someone you just met at a barbecue, or to your family, or to your friends who says, hey, how's the new role? What are you doing? Think about how you would talk about that as much as possible once you've thought about all the variables. And again, just check in with yourself. Do I feel proud about that? Do I feel like I would be achieving something or contributing something at that point? And if that does resonate with you, then that's probably a good sign. Doesn't mean there's not going to be mistakes. Of course, not everything is what it says in the packet, but that's also another aspect. Don't be afraid to make these steps or have these afford yourself these sort of learning experiences when you're out there talking in a lot of traffic. Even some of the conversations that you may have will be as valuable to you for what it's not going to be, i.e. finding out what is the wrong role, something that you think, geez, I'm really pleased I didn't go to that path. That's still a really positive conversation when you're learning more about what makes you tick as well. And then, what is right? I think if I reflect on, that last statement, there's no such thing as right or wrong to a large degree. It could be the right gig at the wrong time. Or conversely, it could be, the wrong gig that you may not want to be in 3 years, but it's going to keep me paying the bills in a really crass sense. It's going to keep, me feeding the kids and out there, and I'll be in a better mood because I feel like I'm doing something. It might help my mental health as well as my well-being simply because I'm doing something, even if I know it's not long-term the perfect gig. I think the mistake we often make is, but once I'm locked into something, I've got to commit. We know the reverse doesn't work. So organizations and even the best willed employers, unfortunately, can or have to dump or make the redundancies at the drop of a hat these days. So likewise in converse, don't be afraid to think, well, you know what, this is going to help me. This is going to help put some food on the table. This is going to give me some learning, or I might be able to impart some of my learning. And then it might only be 6 months. I'll keep the channels open. I'll keep the conversations opening, but I'm in a much better position to take the next gig from a position of power, so to speak, than looking at the first gig that comes along. And then on the same note as that, I think if you can have as many conversations as possible, even the conversations that you're not going to take. Again, also, humans are a pretty simple animal. If you feel like you're making a more informed decision on the right role, because you've had 3 or 4 chats that went to a pretty serious stage, then you're more likely to be content with that decision, whatever that decision may be. And you're also probably more likely to do better and stay longer and all those sorts of things because you feel like it aligns with you more. You're not wondering, was there another opportunity that I'm missing out on simply because I took the first one that came along. And then I think the final aspect of that is to not be afraid to continuously check in. If we've got to the point that we started in this new role, it's very easy to shut down. And it's a fine line between not asking too many questions. Of course, nothing's going to be perfect, but checking in with yourself, saying, is this heading in the right direction? Can I see me contributing and feeling a sense of meaning or purpose in this role at some point in the future? Or was it just entirely not what I was thinking? And do I need to continue ramping up, those other external conversations as well? So I think that's probably some of the aspects that I would consider. I'm just looking to see if there's any of the comments, LJ, on the questions coming in.
There's no questions yet, but I've got a couple. Whilst we wait to see if anyone else, I say I really love the framework, like you, the role, and what's right. And I think it goes back to a little bit what we were saying before as well, when we're thinking about what's right and just trying to reframe stuff, because what's right today might not be right tomorrow. But I think, just that fact of reframing really helped before. I think the other couple of things I was going to say, when we were talking about the right role for now, we've got Michelle doing a session on Thursday around gig work.
Yep.
And I feel like gig working, and to your point of like something for a few months or what's right now whilst the perfect role, could be something worth exploring that I don't think we'd have talked about a couple of years ago. But now with platforms like Workling, like it is a really valuable and valid tool to just try out. And maybe there's different things that you haven't thought about in terms of skill sets or whatever else that you can give a go because you've got that kind of platform available right now. So it isn't like you don't have to jump in with both feet and sign, feel like you're signing your life away for something that you're not sure about. So, and then I think the other one you were saying about just talking to people, I was always told early in my career that you always take the coffee, like whoever it is, whatever it is, like you will learn something. And particularly, and I know I've had it where you think you're going into this interview for your perfect role, and by the time you finish that, you're just like, that is not perfect in any way, shape, or form.
I do not want to do that.
Yeah. And I'm sure we've all been there, but I think it's like, particularly now, just always going in, even if you're like, I'm not 100% or I'm not sure, you don't know what you're going to learn from that person or what's going to come out of it. That will help you move forward.
Or who they know in turn, quite often. I remember in my
100%.
recruiting days, years gone by, someone going for a job and they politely turned it down. But then the guy who was interviewing was at some industry function and said, I met this absolute gun. She was brilliant. I can't hire her at the moment. And that was enough to start the next conversation. You just never know who's in the right traffic for you.
Totally. Absolutely. I found that really valuable and useful. So thank you. I appreciate it. We haven't got any questions now, but if anybody has any questions afterwards that they don't want to ask in a public forum, if you message either of us, we'll absolutely help out. So don't worry about that. But yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No, pleasure. Thanks for organising.